yes. Look, is this important? Because... Oh. No. Oh. He was dead on arrival.
Tragic. Before I begin, an apology to Slice of Pie for the long delay on this one. The reasons are going to become more apparent as the review goes on. But with that out of the way, the episode begins, much to my personal horror. It begins in the mess hall with Neelix, and more Neelix, and more Neelix, and more Neelix. He's getting complimented by Harry for his super awesome coffee that is his own personal recipe, of course. Followed by Chakotay rushing in because there's an important mission that requires his unique insights. Yeah, I know.
Sensors are picking up traces of protomatter inside. I understand you've dealt with it before.
Absolutely, when I was making my living as a trader.
Yes, forget about the ship full of scientists. Forget about the former Borg drone. No. When you need an expert on retrieving highly unstable, energy-rich materials, go find a junk man. And yeah, that's what you were, traitor. You collected junk and gave it to people. That's what you did. You will always be associated with junk, Neelix. In fact, do you know how much you're associated with junk? Ethan Phillips' latest Broadway play is called Junk. You have reached a state of meta-junk, Neelix. That's how much you're a junk man.
What's wrong?
They are pungent.
That's the whole idea. I've been adding Talaxian spices to broaden your palate.
Yes, broaden it in much the same way that a mouse is broadened once you run a car tire over it.
The doctor tells me you have a full complement of taste buds. You've hardly begun to use them.
Plenty of virgin taste buds about to be met by Neelix's band of noxious barbarians. While he invites her to the big Talaxian festival coming up soon, still another person wants to speak with him, because Neelix is so important to the crew. Samantha Wildman is calling up because Naomi is worried about monsters and apparently they'll be driven off by his spices and body odor. After doing a thorough search, Neelix tells Naomi about the Great Forest, a place in the afterlife where everyone gathers to watch over him. With her off to sleep, now it's down to Seven's cargo bay to collect his containment cylinder.
Cylinder? Little cylinder, where are you?
Maybe it died of embarrassment. Talking helps him remember, he says, which no doubt explains why he's constantly babbling crap. It's a reminder that he needs to breathe or he'll fall over. Well, he finds the cylinder and he heads on the mission, where he argues with Tom about making pizzas.
Bread, tomatoes, cheese.
The cheese alone would take days. Separating curds and whey from synthesized milk is a delicate process.
So replicate the cheese.
Yeah, synthesized probably means you replicated it, dipshit. Where else do you think synthesized milk comes from? Do you have Dolores Abernathy in the back with a little cowbell and a breast pump? This just makes the following even more ridiculous, as Neelix is the one giving the orders on collecting the protomatter, something which I'll remind you was mentioned being used in the Genesis device. Something that its use by them, if it would have been known, would have gotten them denounced by reputable scientists. Yes, that was a century earlier, you might be saying. It was also being handled by a commune of geniuses. And our resident expert is someone who has been their cook for 3 years and is yet to be seen wearing a hairnet. Someone for whom it is now canonically and indisputably true knew more about the most dangerous substance in all of existence than he did about bathing. This is quite possibly the least plausible suggestion in Voyager history, and I am including the idea that they don't run out of photon torpedoes because they glue all the pieces back together after they fire them. They get the protomatter, but things are dicey as they're using the shuttlecraft that is saved for the really dangerous missions. Finally, the god Thor himself gets involved and zaps Neelix with a bolt of lightning, killing him. Tom tries doing what he can, but he doesn't have much to work with, and it has only been 10 episodes since he's had to take over Kess's duties, remember. Even for Tom Paris, that is not a lot of time to learn everything there is to know about medicine. Chakotay has a few suggestions after the titles. Yes, we have finally made it past the teaser, I know. And when Tom says those suggestions aren't going to work, he says, fine, get up here and fly the ship then. Stop bothering trying to save Neelix. You know, it's almost as if making your best pilot your field medic was a bad idea, huh? Oh, and I have to say, all those loved ones of the Great Force watching over him, were you asleep at the wheel, huh? Then again, keeping Neelix from dying by his own hand has got to be an exhausting job. It's probably baby's day out every single moment with him. They bring Neelix's corpse back, and the doctor says that there's nothing that could have been done to prevent this. You know, short of not letting the orangutan be in charge. They discuss the funeral arrangements, but that's when Seven shows up because she can raise the dead using Borg technology. With us at almost exactly the halfway point of the series, you can expect this to be used a lot going forward. And by a lot, I of course mean never. It's one thing to introduce some magical doodad that defeats the bad guy of the week that you never mention again. It's another when you have something you can use constantly and can ensure that at least some of the deaths going forward can be reversed. There's a reason that Stargate chose, as a series, to make the sarcophagus from the movie too dangerous for them to use in the series. Unless you're prepared to refine everything to take this ability into account, it disrupts the expected drama far too much. For that reason, raising the dead is only ever used to show that you shouldn't. And considering that they want to raise Neelix, it should apply doubly here, right? Well, anyway, time to get to work.
I want to check his blood viscosity.
Cadaver has been sufficiently prepared.
And they say I have a lousy bedside manner.
Well, it doesn't take much to get the body going again, and soon the dead guy is sitting up in bed, babbling and wondering why he's here. And hopefully not hungry for brains. Especially because Neelix would probably spend 20 minutes before killing you explaining how he intended to cook and season your brain. When he finally comes around and no longer looks like a corpse, they fill him in, and he finds it hard to take on board. You were dead for 18 hours is a bit much, isn't it? I mean, 18 hours is already pushing the limits of bra technology. Never mind the length of time you can be dead and come back. Learning to involve nanoprobes is overwhelming. It's probably lucky you didn't pass out. One of the things to worry about if you've come back from the dead is fainting and people wondering if you're down permanently this time.
I'm releasing you to your quarters. Your body's been through quite a shock, so try to get some rest.
Doc, that is the biggest understatement since Custer said there might be a few more Indians than I thought. Now, at this point, you might have said, Chuck, your antics are all well and good normally, but in this episode, you're kind of acting like an asshole. Well, you have to understand, this whole situation puts me in a very uncomfortable position, and it's part of the reason that I've been keeping this one on ice for so long. You see, for a lot of people, Voyager is retro. They remember it from their youth, or they remember watching it at some point in the past and have gone back to it again, and now they're talking about it with fresh eyes. They didn't start reviewing it when it was on the air and kept going ever since. So that you've had 24 years of Neelix's bullshit to deal with. And let me tell you, if you're exposed to 24 years of Neelix's bullshit, you discover that you can't stand him. Now, knowing that, I have done my best to remain objective and to acknowledge the positives, to try to say, put your feelings aside and try to approach this assuming that you didn't despise him. Well, I can do that, but these have been episodes with Neelix in small doses. How can I put this, though? It's very hard to take on board. Try to imagine it as Neelix is your brother-in-law. The brother-in-law that you can't stand. You dread any thought of having to share a day with this guy. But there are times when, say, there's a huge party or something, and you could spend time with other people, and you only see him for a few minutes at a time, and during those times, he's not acting like a complete twerp, and you could admit, okay, well, he's not completely without any redeeming qualities, right? And then one day comes along and you're told, oh, no, haven't you heard? He's got a terminal disease. he is not long for this world. And you're not heartless. You care. And when asked, can he spend a week at your place so that he can be close to the hospital for some treatments, you go along with that because you know it's the decent thing to do. Have you no empathy after all? Of course you'll do it. To not care in the midst of that suffering? Poof, of course not. Only, after the first few hours realizing that he's dying, you realize also that he's still a jackass. And you can't tell anyone he's a jackass because that's insensitive. He's dying. You can't call the dying man a jackass just because he does something that only a jackass would do. But yet, it's everything that you despised about him running on a loop 24/7 until by day 5, you see him on the couch, using the blanket your dead mother knitted for you as a napkin, watching pay-per-view wrestling, and spilling your last beer all over that autographed Terry Pratchett novel of yours, and you finally say to him, "Good news! You're not going to believe this! You're not dying of a terminal disease! Because I'm going to fucking kill you first!" This is what reviewing this episode is like. Being told to be nice to Neelix for 46 minutes is like asking me to stand silently for 3 hours in an elevator. So what I'm saying is, there's 100 people out there who can write of Neelix's emotional issues with empathy. My contribution to that is this. Ethan Phillips is a fine actor who performs well. Oh, and also, I will resist the urge to cheer on his death for the remainder of the episode. I'll give you that. But don't expect more out of me than I can possibly give. I've already got a dying Japanese singer, a dying android, a dying FBI agent, and a vanished little girl who's probably dying in some other dimension. Sorry, we're all stocked up on dying around here. Time is taken out for Seven and Tuvok to discuss mortality, including her own now, which will be played out in more detail with imperfection, so we can leave it at that. Regardless of what happened to Neelix, life does go on, so they look over what went wrong, and Chakotay plans to run a simulation to investigate further. Neelix asks if he can help, since, after all, he is an expert. His being killed while handling his area of expertise only reinforces how good he is at it. Neelix is rather put out at watching himself get killed, and then mentions that
Sisters, my mother and father, my cousins, everyone who was killed in the war. I took great comfort in knowing that we'd all be together again one day.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
But it's not true. Maybe we pulled you back before any of that could happen.
No. I was dead for 18 hours. I should have experienced something, should remember something.
previously this was supposed to be about Chakotay, but then they learned that it would actually be incredibly poor taste because of true beliefs for him to have that. And while they seem content to hodgepodge and flat out make up whatever they want, I guess they realize even that would be going too far. I just am grateful that he never brought up the happy hunting ground. I honestly don't know how they managed to resist it. Neelix is struggling with the fact that he can't recall anything that happened after he died, but Chakotay says not to give up on his faith so easily. As I discussed previously, religion and science are neither the same nor related, so there are explanations from a religious perspective that could be offered here. Maybe it was known that Neelix wasn't going to stay dead, and so he was just sort of kept in a limbo in that whole time. Or maybe he did experience something, but he wasn't allowed to remember it. Or maybe he can't remember it because those events are not part of the physical brain that he now has, and thus is not going to be in there because that brain didn't experience those events. Or, of course, there is my personal preference, that Neelix was actually stuck in a room with Rick Mayall and Sam Kinison, who screamed at him every time Neelix tried to speak. Later on is that holiday that Neelix was preparing for, in which Tuvok has to give the celebratory welcome.
Welcome to the first night of Prixon.
Prixon was also one of Santa's reindeer who was fired for repeatedly crapping in the stockings hanging by the fireplace. Everybody is on hand, including Harry, sporting his award-winning outfit. Anglican priest superhero goes casual. There's also a special toast to Neelix, who's pretending that he is coping well with things. He's not, actually.
I apologize for the other day on the holodeck. I guess this whole back from the dead thing is hard to get used to. I'm fine now.
You ever want to talk?
Contact B'Elanna and tell her I said she has this coming. While he deals with that, Janeway is more concerned with Seven.
I don't understand the rules and procedures for this type of social occasion.
The rules are simple. Choose a group of people. Listen to their conversation. Then, when you feel like you have something to contribute, chime in.
Then, realize that you said the wrong thing, slink away, spend the rest of the evening reminding yourself that coming was a mistake, that you're worthless, and you will die alone and unmourned. Couldn't be simpler. Neelix leaves the party to tuck Naomi in, and she insists on hearing the story of the Great Forest, much as he does not want to tell it. He's downright irritable when Seven comes by to get information for his further treatments.
By most definitions, you are alive.
Well, part of me isn't alive.
Which part are you referring to?
I don't know, but something is missing. I don't feel like Neelix anymore.
Well, some good came from this, at least. He rants at her so hard that he starts to have a reaction and needs to be rushed to sickbay because it's zombie time. He's going to have to wear a monitor from now on. I'm going to guess a neck thingy. And it turns out that this whole thing might be like insulin and he'll have to take it the rest of his life.
He wants to speak with you, Commander.
Crap, why couldn't have that lightning bolt have hit me instead? Neelix says he wants to use the Akuna to get a vision quest going and get some answers. So Chakotay says that he can, provided that Neelix agrees to work with him afterwards on this, not assume that he can wander the Nethersphere and sort out all of his problems that way. And he should do it. You don't ask to be invited to a synagogue and then assume you can put your feet up and eat pork rinds now, do you? Not unless you're my brother-in-law. So Neelix finds himself at the Prixis party, with his sister there but unable to talk with her himself, until finally manages to chase her out into the Great Forest, where she is ready to tell him that everything he thought was made up and when you die it's just a big flat plate of nothing. Then she rots right in front of him. I have to say, this is definitely the third worst Prixin we've ever had. Everyone, including his own dead body, starts telling Neelix he needs to kill himself. Life is not worth living. And so afterwards, he basically starts clearing the air with everyone, including that rant with Seven, about bringing him back and all that. He says he's sorry for being such a dick.
I want you to know that I don't blame you for bringing me back. To life, I mean. In fact, what you did was very thoughtful.
I would have done the same for any member of this crew.
Well, lesson learned here, won't make the mistake of doing this to anyone else ever again, especially Lieutenant Carey. Chakotay finds him and says that Neelix is holding out on him, but Neelix blows smoke up his ass and says, "Oh no, we'll definitely talk later." In reality, he's plotting his suicide. His ridiculous suicide. They pick up that he's trying to beam himself into the nebula and eliminating any abort sequence control from the bridge. That's how secure Starfleet is. The ship's cook can lock out a bridge officer with something that's not even related to technology that he uses for his job and he didn't even know existed until he arrived 3+ years ago. They barely manage to get him back when he tries to beam out, and then he rigs up something with the tricorder that nobody can override, because drama is demanded no matter how much logic is facepalming right now. Chakotay has to try to talk him off the ledge, but it's Naomi's need for him that convinces him to not go through with it. And we get to close with Naomi under the guiding tree, which brings us to an end, and for me as well. I can't fairly score this one, even though this is opinionated. This episode depends entirely upon a character connection that is a bridge too far for me. It's like trying to review Pan's Labyrinth without speaking Spanish and no subtitles. That's as close as you're going to get to fairness with me, okay? I admit, a 46-minute Neelix episode is about 2 hours too long.
I'm afraid.